There is a moment, just before dawn, when the world is so quiet that it almost feels as if reality itself is holding its breath. In that strange stillness, if you listen closely, you may sense something watching. Not with eyes, not with judgment, but with a presence so vast, so gentle, that it feels both terrifying and deeply comforting at the same time. And in that moment, a question rises from the depths of your being, a question older than humanity itself. What is God, really? Because you see, most people live their entire lives surrounded by noise. Noise in their minds, noise in their fears, noise in the endless pursuit of control. They imagine God as something distant, something separate, something sitting far away in the heavens, observing them like a ruler watching subjects from a throne. And so they live with a quiet anxiety, wondering if they are worthy enough, good enough, pure enough to be accepted by this mysterious divine power. That what if the very nature of God is not distance, but closeness, not separation, but union? Think of a child standing at the edge of the ocean for the first time. The waves roll in with a rhythm that seems alive. The horizon stretches infinitely, and the child feels both small and deeply connected all at once. That feeling, that overwhelming mixture of awe and belonging, is perhaps the closest human experience to sensing the nature of God. Because God is not merely something you look at. God is something you exist within, like the ocean to a fish, like air to a bird, like space to the stars. The divine is not outside the universe. It is the very essence through which everything exists. And yet, we struggle to see it, not because it is hidden, but because it is too present. Have you ever noticed how we rarely think about the air we breathe until we cannot breathe? The air is always there, sustaining life every second. Yet it remains invisible to our attention. In the same way, the presence of God surrounds you, flows through you, and lives within you so completely that you often overlook it. There is a quiet story told by a humble farmer who once spent his entire life searching for God. He traveled to temples, climbed mountains, studied scriptures, fasted, prayed, and waited for some dramatic sign, a voice from the sky, a miracle, a vision. Years passed, and one evening, exhausted and disappointed, he sat beneath a tree as the sun slowly disappeared into the horizon. In that moment, he noticed something simple: the warmth of the fading light touching his face, the sound of leaves moving gently in the wind, the steady rhythm of his own heartbeat. And suddenly, without warning, he began to weep, not out of sadness, but from an overwhelming realization. He whispered softly, "God, you were here all along, weren't you?" And that is the mystery. The nature of God is not something that suddenly appears. It is something that has never been absent. You see, many people imagine God as a problem to solve, a concept to define, a distant authority to obey. But God is not an object among other objects. God is the very ground of existence itself, the silent intelligence that breathes life into everything. Look at the way a seed transforms into a towering tree without any instructions, the way the heart beats without your command, the way the universe unfolds with a harmony so precise that galaxies dance in perfect rhythm. There is a quiet intelligence behind all of this, a creative force that does not force, but flows. And this is where many of us misunderstand the divine nature. We think power means control, domination, strict authority. But divine power is something entirely different. It is not the power of force, it is the power of creation. The sun does not demand that flowers bloom. It simply shines, and the flowers respond naturally. In the same way, the nature of God is not to push or coerce, but to invite, to nurture, to sustain. There is a sacred verse that echoes this truth in a simple yet profound way, that the divine is closer to you than your own breath, nearer than your jugular vein, present in every heartbeat you experience. And if that is true, then it changes everything. It means you are never truly alone, even in your darkest nights. It means that in moments when you feel abandoned, when life seems chaotic and meaningless, there is still a deeper order quietly holding you together. Consider the times in your life when everything seemed to fall apart, when you lost something precious, when uncertainty filled your heart with fear. In those moments, it often feels as if God has disappeared. But what if those moments are not signs of absence, but invitations to see differently? There is a hidden pattern in human suffering. It strips away illusions, removes distractions, and brings you face to face with the deepest questions of existence. Pain, in its mysterious way, can become a doorway, not away from God, but toward a deeper understanding of the divine nature. Because the nature of God is not only found in joy and beauty, it is also present in transformation, in growth, in the silent strength that rises within you when you think you cannot go on. Think of a seed buried in darkness beneath the soil. If the seed could speak, it might believe it is dying, crushed by the weight of the earth above it. But in truth, something miraculous is happening. It is breaking open so that life can emerge. In the same way, many of life's struggles are not punishments. They are processes. They are moments when the divine intelligence is reshaping you, expanding your awareness, guiding you toward a deeper connection with existence. And here lies one of the most profound truths about the nature of God. It is not separate from your own consciousness. The very awareness that allows you to observe your thoughts, to feel love, to recognize beauty, is itself a reflection of the divine. When you experience compassion, kindness, forgiveness, you are not just behaving morally, you are expressing the nature of God through your own being. This is why acts of love feel so powerful. When you comfort someone in pain, when you help a stranger, when you forgive someone who hurt you, there is a quiet sense of peace that fills your heart. That peace is not random. It is the resonance of your soul aligning with the divine nature. Because God is not merely a distant creator. God is the living presence expressing itself through creation. Through you, through every breath you take, through every moment you choose love over fear. And perhaps this is the greatest mystery of all, that the infinite chooses to experience itself through the finite, that the eternal expresses itself through temporary lives, that the boundless speaks through human hearts. You are not separate from God in the way a painting is separate from the artist. You are more like a wave in the ocean, unique in form, temporary in appearance, yet never truly separate from the vast water that gives you existence. When the wave rises, it feels alive. When it falls, it believes it disappears. But the ocean remains unchanged, infinite. In the same way, human life is like a wave in the infinite ocean of divine existence. Birth is the rising, death is the falling, but the essence, the divine reality, remains eternal. And when you begin to see this, when you begin to feel this truth, not just intellectually, but deeply in your heart, something extraordinary happens. Fear begins to lose its grip. Anxiety begins to soften. You stop trying to control everything, and instead, you start trusting the flow of life. Because you realize that you are not moving through existence alone, existence itself is moving through you. So when you feel lost, when the path ahead seems unclear, remember this quiet truth. The nature of God is not to abandon, but to sustain. Not to judge harshly, but to guide patiently. Not to remain distant, but to live intimately within every moment of your life. Even in silence, even in uncertainty, even in pain, the divine presence is there, quietly shaping, gently guiding, lovingly holding you in ways you may not yet understand. And perhaps tonight, as you sit with your thoughts, as you feel the rhythm of your breath, you may begin to sense it, that subtle, comforting presence that has always been there, waiting for you to notice. So be patient with your journey, trust the unseen wisdom at work within your life, and remember, no matter how dark the night may seem, the divine nature is always unfolding in perfect timing, leading you step by step toward a deeper peace you cannot yet imagine. And as this understanding slowly begins to settle into your heart, something subtle starts to change in the way you see the world. The same life that once felt random, harsh, and unpredictable begins to reveal a quiet order beneath its surface, like a hidden melody that was always playing, but you were too distracted to hear. You start to notice how often we humans struggle, not because life is against us, but because we are resisting the very flow that sustains us. Imagine trying to swim against a powerful river. Every movement feels exhausting. Every breath becomes heavier, and the harder you fight, the more tired you become. Yet the moment you stop struggling, and allow the current to carry you, you discover something surprising. The river was never your enemy. It was always trying to move you forward. This is one of the deepest insights into the nature of God, that divine will is not a force that opposes your existence, but a current that carries it. And much of human suffering comes from the illusion that we must control everything, that we must force outcomes, that we must constantly push against uncertainty. Think of how often people say, "Why is this happening to me?" in moments of difficulty. Beneath that question is a quiet assumption that life should obey our expectations. But existence does not unfold according to human plans. It unfolds according to a wisdom far greater than our limited perspective. There is a story of a man who once lost everything he had built over decades: his home, his wealth, his reputation. For months, he lived with bitterness in his heart, convinced that life had betrayed him. He could not see any purpose in his suffering. Years later, when his life had taken an entirely unexpected direction, he was asked if he would change his past if he could. He paused for a long time, then said something remarkable. "If none of that had happened, I would never have become the person I am today." What felt like destruction was actually transformation. This is one of the quiet mysteries of divine nature, that what appears as loss in the moment can be part of a larger unfolding that you cannot yet see. Because God's perspective is not bound by time the way ours is. We see fragments, moments, short chapters, but the divine sees the entire story at once. The beginning, the middle, and the ending, woven together in perfect coherence. And this is why faith is not blind belief. It is trust in the unseen order of existence. Faith does not mean you understand everything. It means you accept that. There is a deeper intelligence guiding life, even when your mind cannot comprehend it. Consider how a child trusts a parent while crossing a busy road. The child does not understand traffic patterns, risks, or timing, yet they hold the parent's hand with complete confidence. That trust does not come from knowledge, it comes from relationship. In the same way, the essence of faith is not about knowing all the answers. It is about recognizing the presence of divine wisdom holding you through every uncertainty. And here lies another profound aspect of God's nature. It is not merely external guidance, it is internal awareness. The voice of divine wisdom often does not come as thunder or dramatic signs. It comes quietly as intuition, as a subtle knowing in your heart, as a calm feeling that gently nudges you toward what is right. Have you ever experienced a moment when you just knew something without logical explanation? A quiet inner certainty that guided your decision, protected you from harm, or led you towards something unexpectedly beautiful. That inner awareness is not random. It is part of the divine presence living within you. Yet many people ignore this inner guidance because they are overwhelmed by noise. Constant worries, fears, comparisons, and distractions. The louder the mind becomes, the harder it is to hear the quiet whisper of divine wisdom. This is why stillness is so sacred. When you sit in silence, when you allow your thoughts to settle, when you simply breathe and observe, something extraordinary begins to happen. Beneath the restless surface of the mind, there is a calm, steady presence that never wavers. That presence is not created by you. It was always there. It is the same presence you feel when you stand beneath a vast night sky filled with stars. The same stillness you sense when watching waves gently touch the shore. The same ace that enters your heart when you experience unconditional love. It is the essence of the divine, silent, steady, and infinite. And when you begin to connect with that stillness, you realize something life-changing. God is not only the creator of life, but the very consciousness through which life is experienced. You are not separate from the divine observer, the awareness that notices your thoughts, that witnesses your emotions, that remains present through every changing moment, is itself a reflection of divine nature. This realization dissolves one of the greatest fears humans carry, the fear of being alone. Because how can you be alone when the very awareness through which you exist is connected to the infinite? Even in your darkest nights, when you feel abandoned by the world, there remains a quiet presence within you that never disappears. It watches, it holds, it sustains. And perhaps this is why, in moments of deep suffering, people often report feeling something unexpected, a strange peace beneath the pain, a quiet strength that seems to come from beyond themselves. That strength is not something you manufacture. It is something you discover. It is the divine nature revealing itself within you, reminding you that you are far more connected, far more supported, and far more deeply loved than you often realize. There is a sacred teaching that says, when you take one step toward the divine takes countless steps toward you. This does not mean that life suddenly becomes easy or free of challenges. It means that you begin to see challenges differently, not as obstacles meant to break you, but as pathways meant to awaken you. Because the nature of God is not to remove every difficulty from your life. It is to give you the strength to grow through them, not to eliminate uncertainty, but to guide you safely through it, not to promise a life without storms, but to ensure that even in the fiercest storms, you are never without a guiding presence. And as you continue walking this journey, you may begin to notice something subtle yet profound. The more you trust, the more peaceful you become. The more you surrender control, the more clarity appears. The more you align with love, compassion, and patience, the more you feel connected to something greater than yourself. Because in truth, that something greater is not separate from you. It is the very source from which your life flows. So when doubt enters your heart, when fear whispers that you are lost or forgotten, remember this quiet truth. The divine presence is not measured by how easy life feels, but by how deeply you are sustained through every experience. Even now, as you listen to these words, as your heart beats steadily, as your breath moves in and out without effort, the nature of God is revealing itself in the simplest, most intimate ways. So trust the process unfolding in your life, even when you cannot yet see its purpose. Have patience with your struggles, for they may be shaping you in ways you cannot imagine. And hold firmly to this gentle reminder that the same divine intelligence that guides the stars across the vast universe is quietly guiding your life toward a destiny filled with meaning, growth, and peace. And slowly, almost without noticing it, you begin to realize that the greatest barrier between you and the divine has never been distance. It has always been perception. For most of your life, you were taught to look for God somewhere outside yourself, in distant heavens, in sacred places, in rare miracles, in moments that seemed extraordinary and far removed from ordinary existence. And because of this, you may have overlooked the most profound truth of all, that the divine does not only live in the extraordinary, it lives in the ordinary, it lives in the quiet rhythm of your breathing, in the warmth of sunlight touching your skin, in the laughter that escapes you when you forget your worries, in the tears that fall when your heart is overwhelmed by love or pain. There is a deep misunderstanding in the human mind that divides life into sacred and ordinary. People imagine that only certain moments are spiritual, moments of prayer, meditation, or worship, while the rest of life is mundane and disconnected from the divine. But this division is an illusion, because if God is truly infinite, then there is no place where God is not present. There is no moment that is empty of divine existence. Think about it for a moment. If the divine created everything, sustains everything, and lives within everything, then even the simplest experiences carry a sacred quality. The sound of rain tapping gently against a window, the feeling of a hand holding yours during difficult times, the quiet relief after a long day's struggle. These are not just random occurrences. They are expressions of a deeper harmony woven into existence. And yet most people rush past these moments without noticing them. Why? Because the human mind is constantly chasing something else, a future goal, a past regret, a fear that has not yet happened. It lives in a state of restless movement, always searching, always reaching, always wanting. But the divine nature is not restless. It is still. It is present. It is here, now, in this very moment. And this is why so many spiritual traditions speak about the power of awareness, not as a technique to escape life, but as a way to fully experience it. When you truly become present, when you stop running mentally into the past or future, something extraordinary happens. The world begins to feel alive in a new way. Colors appear richer, sounds feel clearer, and a quiet sense of connection begins to fill your heart. It is as if a veil has lifted, revealing that the divine presence was never hidden, only unnoticed. There is a simple story about an old woman who spent years praying for God to speak to her. Every day, she would sit in her small room, close her eyes, and plead for a sign, a voice, a miracle that would prove the divine was real. One day, after many years of silence, she cried out in frustration, "Why will you not speak to me?" And in that moment, she suddenly heard something unexpected. Not a voice from the sky, not a thunderous declaration, but the gentle sound of wind moving through the trees outside her window. For the first time, she truly listened. She noticed the rhythm, the softness, the life within that simple sound. And as she listened more deeply, her heart began to fill with an overwhelming sense of peace. Tears flowed down her face as she whispered, "You have been speaking all along. I just never knew how to listen." This is one of the deepest secrets of the divine nature. God does not always reveal through dramatic events. More often, the divine reveals through subtlety, through silence, through presence. And when you begin to see this, your relationship with life changes completely. You stop waiting for extraordinary miracles, and you begin to recognize the miracle that life itself already is. Consider how astonishing your existence truly is. Out of countless possibilities, you are here, conscious, aware, capable of love, thought, creativity, and reflection. Your heart beats without you commanding it. Your lungs breathe without effort. Your mind can imagine worlds that do not yet exist. This is not ordinary. This is miraculous. And the more deeply you contemplate this, the more you realize that existence itself is the greatest expression of divine nature. But here is where the human struggle often begins. Even though we are surrounded by this divine presence, we often feel disconnected from it. Why? Because of fear. Fear is the greatest illusion that separates humans from their awareness of the divine. It creates the feeling of isolation, of vulnerability, of being alone in a vast and uncertain universe. Fear whispers that you must control everything to survive, that you must protect yourself constantly, that life is something to fight rather than something to trust. But when you look deeply, you begin to see that fear itself is rooted in misunderstanding. It comes from forgetting that you are not separate from the very existence that sustains you. Imagine a wave in the ocean becoming afraid of disappearing. It might struggle desperately to remain in its form, fearing the moment it will fall back into the water. But the wave does not realize that even when its shape changes, it never stops being the ocean. In the same way, much of human fear comes from identifying only with the temporary aspects of life, the body, the roles, the possessions, the circumstances. We forget that beneath all these changing forms, there is an unchanging essence. That essence is the divine presence within you. It is the awareness that remains constant through every phase of your life, through childhood, youth, adulthood, joy, loss, success, and struggle. Everything else changes, but that quiet sense of I am remains steady. And that steady awareness, that silent witness within you, is one of the clearest reflections of God's nature. When you begin to connect with this truth, fear slowly begins to dissolve. You realize that life is not something happening against you. It is something unfolding through you. Even challenges, even losses, even endings are not signs of abandonment. They are part of a greater rhythm, the same rhythm that guides the cycles of seasons, the rising and setting of the sun, the constant transformation of the universe. There is a sacred message, often repeated across spiritual traditions, that the divine does not waste anything. No pain is meaningless. No struggle is without purpose. Even your deepest wounds can become sources of compassion, wisdom, and strength. Think about the times in your life when you have grown the most. Rarely does growth come from comfort alone. It often comes from moments that challenge you, stretch you, and force you to look deeper within yourself. In those moments, it may feel as if everything is falling apart. But in reality, something within you is being reshaped. The divine nature is not only about creation, it is also about transformation. Just as fire refines gold, just as storms strengthen trees, life's difficulties often refine the human spirit. And when you begin to trust this process, you no longer see challenges as signs that God has left you. You begin to see them as signs that God is still working within you, still guiding your growth, still shaping your journey toward a deeper awareness of truth. So when life feels uncertain, when you cannot understand why things are happening the way they are, hold on to this quiet assurance. The divine presence is not measured by how clearly you see the path ahead, but by the unseen wisdom that continues to guide you step by step. Even when you feel lost, you are still being led. Even when you feel broken, you are still being held. Even when you feel alone, the nature of God remains closer than your own breath, silently sustaining you through every moment. So allow yourself to trust the unfolding of your life, even when it does not match your expectations. Allow yourself to rest in the awareness that you are part of something vast, intelligent, and deeply loving. And remember, the divine does not rush. It unfolds with perfect timing. Be patient with your journey. Remain open to the quiet presence within you, and know that every experience, whether joyful or painful, is gently guiding you toward a deeper understanding of the sacred nature that has always been a part of you. And so, as this journey through understanding begins to settle deeply into your heart, you may start to notice something quietly profound taking place within you. A soft shift, a gentle loosening. It is as though the heavy grip you once held on life, the constant need to control outcomes, predict the future, and protect yourself from every uncertainty, begins to relax. Not because life suddenly becomes predictable, but because you begin to trust something far greater than predictability. You begin to trust the nature of God as a living, flowing presence, rather than a distant authority. For so long, humanity has approached the divine with tension, as if standing before a judge, fearing punishment, seeking approval, measuring worth. But the deeper you look, the more this image dissolves. Because the true nature of God is not rigid, it is not anxious, it is not insecure. It is endlessly patient, it is quietly compassionate, it is infinitely present. Imagine watching a mother teach her child to walk. The child stumbles, falls, cries, and struggles to find balance. Yet the mother does not scold the child for falling. She does not withdraw love because of the child's mistakes. She simply watches with gentle attention, ready to support, ready to encourage, ready to lift the child whenever needed. In the same way, the divine presence does not abandon you because you struggle. It does not withdraw because you doubt. It does not turn away because you make mistakes. It remains. Always. There is a deep peace that comes when you truly understand this, that you do not need to be perfect to be held by God's presence. You only need to be sincere, because sincerity opens the heart, and an open heart naturally connects with the divine. Think of how often you carry silent guilt or shame within you, regrets about the past, words you wish you had never spoken, choices you wish you had made differently. These feelings can create a heavy illusion that you are somehow unworthy of divine closeness. But the nature of God is not to count your failures. It is to guide your transformation. Just as the sun continues to shine, even after the darkest storm, divine presence remains steady, even when your life feels clouded by mistakes or pain. And perhaps this is one of the most liberating truths you can realize. God's love is not fragile. It does not depend on your perfection. It does not fluctuate with your circumstances. It is constant, like the quiet rhythm of the universe itself. When you begin to trust this, something extraordinary happens inside you. You stop fighting yourself. You stop running from your own humanity. You begin to accept that your journey, with all its flaws, struggles, and imperfections, is still part of a divine unfolding. And from that acceptance, a deep peace begins to grow. This peace does not mean life becomes free from difficulty. It means you are no longer shaken by every difficulty. It means you begin to feel anchored within something unchanging. You become like a tree with deep roots, able to bend with strong winds without breaking. Because you know that beneath the changing surface of life, there is a steady foundation holding you. That foundation is the presence of God within existence itself, within you, within every moment. There is another subtle realization that emerges as you go deeper into this understanding, that the nature of God is not only about receiving love, it is about expressing love. The more you connect with divine awareness, the more naturally compassion flows through you. You begin to see others not as strangers or opponents, but as fellow expressions of the same divine source. Their struggles become understandable, their pain becomes relatable, their humanity becomes visible. And this changes the way you live. You become gentler in our words, more patient in your reactions, more forgiving in your judgments. Not because you are forcing yourself to be moral, but because you are beginning to see life through a deeper lens, the lens of unity rather than separation. This is one of the most powerful reflections of God's nature. It transforms hearts quietly, not through force, but through awareness. And when enough hearts awaken to this awareness, the world itself begins to change. Because the divine does not act only through dramatic miracles. It acts through human kindness, through courage, through understanding. Through every small moment where love is chosen over fear. Think about it. Some of the most life-changing experiences you have ever had may not have been grand events. They may have been simple acts, a kind word at the right moment, someone standing by you when you felt alone, a gesture of forgiveness that healed an old wound. These moments carry a sacred quality because they are expressions of divine nature moving through human lives. And this leads to one of the most beautiful realizations of all. You are not merely a passive observer of the divine. You are an active participant in its expression. Every time you choose patience instead of anger, you reflect divine patience. Every time you choose compassion instead of indifference, you reflect divine compassion. Every time you choose hope instead of despair, you reflect divine light. In this way, your life itself becomes a living bridge between the human and the divine. And perhaps this is the ultimate purpose hidden within existence, not simply to survive, not merely to achieve, but to awaken to this connection and express it fully, to live in such a way that your presence itself becomes a source of peace for others. To walk through life knowing that you are never separate from the sacred, as this realization deep, NS, fear of the future, begins to soften. You understand that whatever comes, joy or loss, success or challenge, you will not face it alone. The same divine presence that has carried you through every moment until now will continue to guide you forward. Even in times of uncertainty, there is a quiet order unfolding. Even in times of pain, there is unseen compassion holding you. Even in times of darkness, there is a light that never fades. So as you sit with this understanding, allow yourself to rest in it. Allow yourself to breathe slowly, to feel the gentle rhythm of life moving through you. And remember this simple, powerful truth: the nature of God is not something distant or unreachable. It is the silent presence that has always been with you, before every fear, beneath every thought, within every heartbeat. It is the stillness that remains when all worries fade. It is the love that continues even when circumstances change. It is the quiet assurance that you are held, guided, and deeply connected to something infinite. So be patient with your path. Trust the unfolding of your life and walk forward with the calm confidence that no matter what lies ahead, the divine presence will always be there, gently leading you toward deeper peace, greater awareness, and a love that never ends. Then let us bring everything together, gently, like the final notes of a beautiful melody fading into silence. Take a slow breath for a moment and feel it fully. That breath you just took, you did not create it. You did not design the air, nor command your lungs to function, nor instruct your heart to continue beating. And yet here you are, alive, sustained, carried by a quiet intelligence that has been with you from your very first moment. This is where the journey always leads, back to the simplest, most profound realization of all, that the nature of God has nay. Been far away. It has never been hidden behind distant skies or locked inside unreachable mysteries. It has been present in every moment of your life, even in the ones where you felt lost, especially in the ones where you felt broken. Think about your past for a moment. Remember the nights when you thought you would not make it through the pain, the moments when fear filled your chest, the times when the future looked uncertain and dark, and yet somehow you continued. Something carried you. Something gave you strength when you had none left. Something quietly held you together when everything felt like it was falling apart. That something was never random. It was the silent, steady presence of the divine nature working within you, guiding you, sustaining you, waiting patiently for you to recognize it. Because God does not shout over the noise of the world. God whispers through life itself, through the strength you didn't know you had, through the peace that appears after storms, through the unexpected moments of hope that rise even in the darkest times. And now, as you reflect on this journey, you may begin to see your life differently, not as a series of random events, but as a sacred unfolding, a story shaped by an intelligence far greater than human understanding. Every joy you experienced was a glimpse of divine beauty. Every struggle you faced was a doorway to deeper awareness. Every moment of love you felt was a direct reflection of the divine nature flowing through you. Nothing was wasted. Nothing was meaningless. Even your pain, even your doubts, even your waiting were part of a greater transformation that is still unfolding within you. And this realization brings a quiet freedom. You no longer need to carry the heavy burden of controlling everything. You no longer need to fear every uncertainty. You no longer need to believe that you are alone in this vast universe, because you are not separate from the source of life. You are part of it. You are held within it. You are an expression of it. Like a wave rising from the ocean, you may change form, you may face storms, you may rise and fall, but you never stop being part of the infinite water that gave you existence. And this truth, when it settles deeply into your heart, creates a peace that nothing in the world can take away. A peace that remains steady even when life is uncertain. A peace that whispers gently within you, you are safe, you are guided, you are deeply loved. So as you move forward from this moment, walk with this awareness. In times of joy, remember to be grateful. In times of struggle, remember to be patient. In times of uncertainty, remember to trust. Because the same divine presence that has carried you this far will continue to carry you through every chapter still ahead. And now, before we part, let us end with a quiet prayer, not spoken loudly, but felt deeply within the heart. May you always feel the gentle presence of the divine in every breath you take. May your fears soften into trust and your worries dissolve into peace. May you find strength in moments of weakness, light in moments of darkness, and hope in moments of uncertainty. May your heart remain open to love, your mind open to wisdom, and your spirit anchored in the quiet knowing that you are never alone. And may you walk through this life with calm confidence, knowing that the infinite presence of God is not somewhere far away. It is right here, within you, around you, always. And in that realization, may you find the deep, unshakable peace your soul has been searching for all along.
There comes a time when even your will begins to tremble. You've been pushing for so long that you can't quite remember what it felt like not to. Every morning you wake up and there is that quiet command inside your head to try again, to improve, to hold yourself together. You tell yourself you have no choice, that stopping would mean failure, that rest must be earned, but somewhere deep down, you can feel that you're becoming tired in a different way now. Not the tiredness that sleep fixes, but the kind that touches your bones, the kind that whispers, enough. Most people believe exhaustion comes from doing too much, but that's not quite true. It comes from doing what was never really yours to do. It comes from carrying identities that don't fit, from keeping promises you never actually made, from fighting to be someone you think you should be. Life was never meant to feel like constant resistance, yet somehow we've turned even peace into a project. The modern mind has made effort into a virtue. We are told that every good thing must be earned: happiness, love, rest, even awakening. You must meditate correctly, breathe correctly, forgive correctly, live correctly. But this idea of correctness is precisely what keeps you tense. You start to treat existence like an exam, checking whether you're passing or failing at being alive. And the more you check, the more life slips through your fingers. There is a story I like about a man who went to a wise teacher and said, "I want to be at peace." The teacher smiled and said, "Drop the I, that's ego. Drop the want, that's desire. What's left?" The man sat in silence for a long while. What was left was peace itself. You see, it's not that you don't know how to rest. It's that you've forgotten that resting doesn't require permission. The tree doesn't negotiate with the wind before it sways. The river doesn't ask if it's flowing correctly. Only the human mind questions its right to be at ease. When you've been trying for too long, your own being begins to rebel. That rebellion doesn't come as anger or loudness. It comes as numbness, as disinterest, as quiet fatigue. The body begins to slow down. The spirit stops answering your ambitions, and everything feels dull. You call it burnout, but it's really honesty. It's life saying, "I cannot pretend anymore." And yet, even here, the habit to strive continues. You start to think, "I must recover quickly," or "I'll rest just enough to go back to working hard again." But true rest isn't preparation for more effort. True rest is the recognition that effort was never needed. You have been breathing life as though it were a job. You've been trying to keep the rhythm going, believing that if you stop, something terrible will happen. But life has been breathing you all along. When you stop forcing, the breath continues. When you stop controlling, the heart still beats. This is the beginning of understanding that trying is not the same as living. There's a strange beauty in realizing that you don't have to keep the world spinning. It spins on its own. You don't have to hold everything together. The universe already knows how. Think about a flower. It does not strain to bloom. It doesn't calculate when to open. It feels the warmth of the sun, and something inside it simply unfolds. That's what you are not the one making things happen, but the one being unfolded by life itself. So when you find yourself exhausted but unable to stop trying, you can begin by simply watching the trying. Don't try to quit trying, just notice it. Watch how the mind says, "Keep moving, keep fixing, keep improving," and see it as a habit, not a truth. In that watching, something miraculous happens. Awareness itself begins to rest. You realize that effort is a kind of resistance, a way of saying, "Life, you are not yet good enough." But what if life never needed to be improved? What if the moment you stop resisting it, it already becomes perfect, not in the moral sense, but in the whole sense? Trying to perfect life is like polishing a wave. The more you touch it, the more it scatters. When you stop meddling, the surface of the water becomes clear again, and in that clarity, you finally see what was always there, yourself, not as a worker or a seeker or a struggler, but as awareness itself. Awareness is effortless. It doesn't need to maintain itself. It doesn't wake up in the morning and say, "I must continue being aware." It simply is. And that's the truth of who you are. You are not the effort, you are the space in which effort happens. The exhaustion you feel isn't a failure, it's a doorway. It's the body's way of guiding you home. It says, "Come back, stop running, nothing is chasing you." And when you listen to that invitation, something shifts quietly inside. The muscles unclench, the breath deepens, the mind stops asking what comes next. For a few brief moments, you're not a project, not a person trying to become. And when you listen to that invitation, something shifts quietly inside. The muscles unclench, the breath deepens. The mind stops asking what comes next. For a few brief moments, you're not a project, not a person trying to become. You're simply being. And that simple being, unadorned and unforced, is what you've been searching for all along. You don't have to earn rest. You are made of it. You don't have to deserve peace. You are already peace, temporarily disguised as a tired human being trying to remember where it went. When you understand that, the world doesn't need to change for you to rest. The circumstances don't have to improve. The people around you don't need to behave differently. You just have to stop holding your breath long enough to remember that life is not waiting for you to catch up. It has been carrying you the entire time. The beauty of surrender is that nothing actually stops. Everything continues, but without strain. You still work, you still love, you still face challenges, but they flow through you instead of against you. You begin to act from ease rather than toward it. And that, perhaps, is the quiet secret of all spiritual exhaustion. It isn't a curse. It's the universe's way of making you tired of pretending that you are in control. There's a moment that comes after long fatigue when even thought becomes soft. The voice that once urged you forward begins to lose its conviction. It still speaks, but its words don't land quite the same way. You should be doing more, it says. But it sounds almost tired of hearing itself. You start to notice the absurdity of how long you've been obeying it. You remember the countless times you pushed yourself because you believed something waited at the end of the road, the perfect day, the perfect peace, the perfect version of yourself. But the further you went, the more you realized there was no finish line, only a looping horizon. Every goal melted into the next one, and the moment you reached what you thought would be relief, your mind whispered, just one more step. You see, the game of self-improvement never ends because it feeds on its own dissatisfaction. It survives by convincing you that who you are right now is not enough. And as long as you believe that voice, you will never rest, not even for a breath. So the first act of wisdom is not to conquer that voice, but to recognize it for what it is, habit. It is not life itself. It is the echo of a world that believes worth is measured by motion. Every culture has its myth of progress. In the modern one, progress became a moral duty. We build faster machines, we write longer lists, we measure success by the number of things done rather than the depth with which anything was lived. Even spirituality was infected by this fever. Meditation became another race, another ladder to climb. But awareness does not improve through struggle. It simply notices. The moment you see the trap, you are already free from it. Try this sometime. Sit for a few minutes and allow yourself to do nothing. Don't even call it meditation. Just sit. You'll notice almost immediately how the mind resists. It says, I should be using this time. I should be productive. Watch that urge as if it belonged to a stranger. You'll see that effort is not your nature, it's conditioning. When you stop obeying it, something ancient begins to breathe again inside you, the quiet intelligence of rest. Look at animals. They don't rest because they've finished their to-do list. They rest because the sun is warm, because the moment invites them. They act when there is movement, and they lie still when there isn't. That rhythm, that effortless alignment with the pulse of existence, is what humans once knew before they became afraid of stillness. To be still in this world is to appear useless, and nothing terrifies the ego more than uselessness. It thrives on proving itself. Yet usefulness is temporary, while being is eternal. When you let go of the need to prove your worth, you begin to rediscover wonder. You see how much of life you've missed by trying to justify your place in it. The color of the sky, the sound of your own breathing, the subtle hum of aliveness that has always been present, these return when striving subsides. And in that rediscovery, gratitude awakens. Not the kind you list in a journal, but the kind that happens wordlessly, like a flower opening at dawn. You don't say, I am grateful. You simply feel the quiet joy of existence. That joy does not depend on success or progress. It arises from the simple permission to be. When you understand that, even tiredness feels different. You no longer resent it. You let the body rest, the mind drift, and you see that exhaustion was never your enemy, it was your teacher. It came to show you the limits of control. It came to whisper, now, stop, you've done enough. You see, effort is not wrong. It's just not meant to be permanent. It's a wave that must fall back into the ocean. The problem begins when we try to hold the wave in place, when we try to live in perpetual crest. Life breathes in and out. There are times for expansion and times for surrender. The wise person does not cling to one or the other. They move with the rhythm as a dancer moves with the music. When you finally allow yourself to stop, you may feel fear at first. The silence can seem heavy. The stillness may feel like a void. But if you stay long enough, you realize the void isn't empty, it's full. Full of everything you were too busy to notice. Full of the pulse of being, the quiet hum of awareness itself. And then the most natural thing happens, energy returns. But now it flows differently. It no longer burns from tension, it moves from ease. You begin to act without forcing. Things get done, not through pushing, but through participation. You are no longer the worker dragging the load. You are the current carrying the boat. This is what the Taoists meant by Wu Wei, action without effort, movement without strain. It isn't laziness, it's precision. It's the intelligence of water flowing exactly where it needs to go. So when you feel that you cannot stop trying, do not fight it. See it, smile at it. Let the exhaustion do its work on you. Let it soften your pride. Let it show you how unnecessary most of your inner battles were. Eventually you will find that you can rest even while moving, that effort itself can become ease. And when that happens, life stops feeling like something to manage. It becomes something to experience. You realize that rest was never the reward at the end of the path, it was the path itself. The truth is beautifully simple. You are allowed to stop. You are allowed to be carried. You are allowed to be ordinary, unaccomplished, unfinished, and still completely whole. When you finally believe that, exhaustion turns to peace. And peace is what you were trying to find by working so hard all along. There's a peculiar lightness that appears when the struggle finally dissolves. You wake up one morning and realize that the world hasn't changed, but your grip on it has loosened. The same work waits on the table. The same people expect your attention. The same sounds move through the day. Yet, something invisible is gone, that constant sense of being late to your own life. This is what true rest feels like. Not absence of motion, but absence of resistance. The river still flows, the seasons still turn, but now you are moving with them instead of against them. You begin to notice that life was never meant to be wrestled into submission. It was meant to be danced with. When you stop pulling, it stops pulling back. It's strange how this understanding arrives. It doesn't come from new knowledge, but from finally growing tired of your own tension. You no longer need to convince life to cooperate. You start to trust that it already knows where to go. And in that trust, something ancient begins to return, the natural rhythm that was always beneath the noise. You eat when hungry, sleep when tired, speak when words come, stay silent when they don't. It feels simple, almost childlike, as if the universe has taken over the task of living. The mind doesn't like this at first. It's too quiet. It doesn't have metrics for ease. It asks, am I doing it right? And life replies, there's nothing to do right. There's only what's happening. When you understand that, even your problems begin to breathe. They stop being heavy walls and start becoming passing weather. You don't deny them. You just stop identifying with them. You realize that you were never the storm. You were the sky. And the sky doesn't get tired of holding the clouds. It just lets them move. You start to see that exhaustion was never the problem, control was. You were never tired from doing too much. You were tired from trying to dictate how things should be. The effort to control is subtle. It hides inside even the most noble intentions. You try to control your emotions so that you can be spiritual, your image so that you can be loved, your destiny so that you can feel safe. But the more you try, the further you drift from the effortless intelligence that has been guiding life since the beginning. Look at the trees again. They don't manage their growth. They don't consult a plan before sprouting. Their perfection lies in their lack of strategy. They trust the soil, the rain, the sun. They let the universe grow them. And this, you see, is what the universe is doing with you. You are being grown. All the strain, all the seeking, all the fatigue, they were not mistakes, but growing pains. You were learning to let life do what it does best. You were learning to stop pretending that you are separate from its flow. Once this is seen, the world begins to look softer. You no longer judge people for being asleep or awake, strong or weak, disciplined or chaotic. You see that everyone is simply being lived by the same current, each at their own pace, each in their own shape. The need to compare dissolves, the envy fades, the guilt quiets, because now you understand that nobody is behind and nobody is ahead. There is no race. When that realization sinks in, gratitude rushes in like air into lungs that have been held too long. You start to love again, not in the sentimental way, but as a quiet recognition that everything belongs. You find beauty in the ordinary, the way sunlight touches the sink, the sound of a kettle boiling, the tired laugh of a stranger on the bus. These small things were always holy. You were just too busy chasing bigger ones to notice. This is what rest does. It restores vision. You begin to see that the sacred was never elsewhere. It was in the pauses between thoughts, in the stillness between breaths, in the overlooked simplicity of existing. And because you finally stop rushing, life starts to show you its secret patterns. You begin to see how even the difficult moments were part of your unfolding. The heartbreaks, the failures, the sleepless nights, none of them wasted. Each was carving space for something deeper to grow. There's a softness that comes with seeing this, a tenderness toward everything you once resisted. You stop dividing your experience into good and bad. It's all movement now, all expression. Rest becomes your natural state, not because you avoid work or silence your ambition, but because you finally see that even effort can be effortless when it flows from being. When you cook, you simply cook. When you speak, you simply speak. When you rest, you truly rest. Nothing stands in the way. It's not that life becomes easier, it becomes truer. The most surprising part of this transformation is that it doesn't make you passive, it makes you alive. You act more clearly because you are no longer acting from fear. You create, but not to prove anything. You help others, not because you should, but because the impulse to give rises naturally from peace. You realize that when you were striving, you were actually trying to find permission to live. And now that permission has been given not by the world, but by your own awareness. The irony is beautiful. You spent years trying to reach a place that was never absent. The one who was seeking rest was made of rest all along. That understanding doesn't require effort to maintain. Once seen, it sustains itself. And so, you walk differently now. You breathe differently. Even your tiredness feels sacred. You know that when fatigue comes again, it's not punishment. It's just another reminder to pause and return. The world continues to move fast, chaotic, demanding. But within you, there is a still point, a place untouched by hurry, a place that whispers, all is well, even when it isn't. That's the gift exhaustion came to give you. Not weakness, but wisdom. The wisdom of remembering that you don't have to be the one doing life. Life is doing you, and it's doing it beautifully.
Here we are, staring at something that has troubled spiritual men and women for thousands of years. This battle with lust. And the strange thing is, the more awake you become, the more conscious of the divine, the fiercer this battle seems to grow. Why is that? Why should the person who seeks God most earnestly be the very one who wrestles most deeply with desire? Let me tell you what is happening here. And I must warn you, this is not the comfortable sermon you might expect. This is about seeing the whole picture, not just the parts we like to talk about in public. The first thing to understand is this: when you awaken spiritually, when you begin to see life as it truly is, You don't become less human. You become more human. You become more aware of everything. The divine, yes, but also the earthly. The sacred and the profane. The angelic and the animal. Think of it this way. Before awakening, you were like a person walking through life half asleep. Your senses were dulled. Your awareness was clouded. But awakening is like turning up the volume on everything. Suddenly you can hear the birds singing more clearly. You can taste your food more vividly. You can feel the sun on your skin with greater intensity. And yes, you can feel desire more powerfully too. This is the first reason. Spiritual sensitivity amplifies everything. When you open your spiritual eyes, you don't just open them to heaven. You open them to the full spectrum of human experience. The same sensitivity that lets you feel God's presence also makes you more aware of the body's yearnings. The same consciousness that perceives divine beauty also perceives earthly beauty with shocking intensity. The old religious teachers often missed this point. They thought awakening would make you less aware of the flesh, but it's exactly the opposite. A spiritually awake person feels everything more deeply: joy and sorrow, peace and restlessness, love and lust. The heightened state of awareness that comes with spiritual growth doesn't shut down your humanity. It turns up the dial on all of it. So here you are, a person seeking God, and suddenly you find yourself feeling desire more intensely than ever before. And you think something has gone wrong. You think you're falling backward. But actually, you're just becoming more alive, more aware, more fully human. The question is not how to stop feeling. The question is how to be with what you feel without being controlled by it. Now let's look at the second reason. And this one is painful to admit. Those who are spiritually awake often find themselves alone, not because they're better than others, but because they see things differently. They can't engage in the usual conversations anymore. The gossip feels hollow. The endless chatter about nothing feels unbearable. The obsession with status and money and appearances seems like children playing make-believe. And so they drift away from the crowd. Or the crowd drifts away from them. Either way, they end up alone. And loneliness is a very particular kind of hunger. When you have no one to share your thoughts with. When you have no one who understands the things you're seeing. When you're carrying visions and insights that others would think mad, you feel isolated in a way that cuts deep. Lust becomes a kind of bridge back to human connection. Even if it's false connection, even if it's empty connection, at least it's something. At least for a moment you're not alone. The body pressed against another body. The eyes meeting another's eyes. For that brief time, the terrible loneliness lifts. Do you see the trap? The very path that leads you closer to truth also leads you further from the crowd. And the human animal in you cries out for contact, for touch, for the warmth of another. Lust offers a counterfeit solution. It promises connection but delivers only more isolation. Because after the moment passes, you're still alone, often more alone than before. This is why so many spiritual seekers, so many monks and mystics and holy men and women throughout history have struggled in secret with desire. They withdrew from the world to seek God. And they found God, yes, but they also found crushing loneliness. And lust came knocking at the door of that loneliness, offering companionship, even if only for an hour. The third reason is perhaps the most mysterious. When you begin to wake up spiritually, you become a threat. Not to people necessarily, though sometimes to them too. But you become a threat to the forces that keep humanity asleep. Call them what you will. Demons, if you like. The powers of darkness. Or simply the momentum of unconsciousness that governs most human life. Whatever you call these forces, they do not want you awake. They do not want you seeing clearly. They do not want you spreading consciousness to others. And so they attack. They probe for weaknesses. They look for ways to pull you back into the dream, back into the trance, back into the endless cycle of grasping and wanting and never being satisfied. Lust is a magnificent weapon for this purpose. Why? Because it works. It really does pull people back into unconsciousness. When you're caught in the grip of lust, when desire is burning through you, you cannot think clearly, you cannot meditate, you cannot pray, you cannot rest in that quiet inner space where God speaks. You are pulled entirely into the body, into sensation, into the fever of wanting something right now, and so the attacks come, stronger and stronger as you grow in awareness. Not because you're doing anything wrong, but because you're doing something right. You're waking up. And the forces of sleep do not give up their prisoners without a fight. This is what the scriptures mean when they speak of spiritual warfare. It's not a metaphor. It's not poetry. It's the actual experience of anyone who tries to live consciously in an unconscious world. The battle is real. The enemy is real. And lust is one of his favorite weapons because it works so terribly well. The fourth reason is about wounds. Old wounds. Deep wounds. Wounds we carry from childhood. From rejection. From betrayal. From all the ways life has hurt us before we even knew what was happening. Most people walk through life never looking at these wounds. They're too painful, too frightening. But when you begin to wake up spiritually, you start seeing them. You start feeling them. All the old pain rises to the surface. The abandonment, the shame, the fear of not being loved, the conviction that you're not enough. And here's what happens. Lust offers to soothe these wounds. It offers a temporary balm. When you're in the grip of desire, when you're pursuing or being pursued, you forget the pain for a while. You feel wanted. You feel alive. You feel like maybe, just maybe, you are enough after all. But it's a lie. Lust doesn't heal wounds. It just covers them up for a moment. Like putting a bandage on a festering sore without cleaning it first. The infection remains, and often grows worse. Because now you've added shame to the wound. Now you've added the knowledge that you're using people, or being used, or both. Now you've added another layer of pain on top of the original pain. The spiritually awake person sees all of this. They see the wound. They see the lust rising to cover it. They see the shame that follows. They see the whole cycle. And seeing it doesn't make it stop. Sometimes seeing it makes it worse. Because now you're aware of what you're doing even while you're doing it. You're conscious of the trap, even as you step into it. Healing these old wounds requires something else entirely. It requires facing them, sitting with them, letting them be felt without running away into distraction or comfort or false connection. This is hard work, the hardest work there is. And many people, even spiritually awakened people, would rather battle lust than do this deeper work of healing. Because at least lust offers moments of pleasure, however brief. The work of healing offers only pain, at least at first. The fifth reason is the most paradoxical of all. The very gifts that make you spiritually powerful also make you vulnerable. When you have heightened sensitivity, when you can feel the divine presence, when you can sense the interconnection of all things, you're operating at a very high frequency. Your consciousness is expanded. Your awareness is vast. But you're still in a body. You're still flesh and blood. You're still subject to all the drives and hungers and needs of the animal self. And here's the strange thing. The higher your consciousness rises, the stronger the pull downward becomes. It's as if the universe seeks balance, as if the very expansion of your spiritual nature creates an equal and opposite pull toward the purely physical. This is why so many spiritual teachers, so many gifted healers and prophets and visionaries have fallen into scandals of the flesh. Not because they were hypocrites, not because their spiritual gifts were fake, but because the combination of high spiritual power and unguarded physical nature creates a dangerous situation. Like a tall building without a foundation. The higher it rises, the more catastrophic the fall. The answer to this is discipline. But not the grim teeth-gritting kind of discipline that feels like punishment. Rather the discipline of tending to the whole self, spirit and body, mind and flesh. You cannot just soar in the spiritual realms and ignore the needs of the body. You cannot just pray and meditate and expect the physical nature to take care of itself. The body needs to be honored, fed properly, exercised, given rest, given healthy touch and connection, given creative expression. When these needs are met in healthy ways, lust has less power. When they're ignored or denied, lust becomes overwhelming because it's trying to fill too many holes at once. So what do we do with all of this? How do we live with this strange combination of heightened spiritual awareness and powerful physical desire? First, we stop pretending the battle doesn't exist. We stop acting as if spiritual people are supposed to float above all this earthly messiness. The flesh is real. Desire is real. And fighting a real enemy requires acknowledging it's there. Second, we stop fighting alone. The isolation I spoke of earlier is part of the trap. Lust thrives in secrecy. It grows in darkness, when we can find even one other person to be honest with. Someone who won't judge us but will stand with us. The power of lust begins to break. Not because confession is magic, but because isolation is what feeds the beast. Third, we attend to the wounds. This means sitting with the pain instead of running from it. This means feeling the loneliness instead of medicating it with false connection. This means looking at the old rejections and abandonments and letting them be seen and acknowledged. It's painful work, but it's the only work that actually heals. Fourth, we practice presence with our desire without acting on it. This is perhaps the hardest practice of all. When lust rises, the instinct is to either indulge it or suppress it. Both of these are forms of violence. Indulging it leads to shame and emptiness. Suppressing it leads to explosion later. The middle way is to simply be present with the feeling. To feel the heat of desire without having to do anything about it. To notice how it rises and falls like a wave. To observe it the way you might watch a storm from a safe place. This takes tremendous courage. But it's in this space of presence without action that real transformation happens. Not because you're fighting the desire, but because you're neither fighting it nor feeding it. You're just watching it. And in the watching, something shifts. Finally, we remember that we are not this battle. We are not the desire or the shame or the struggle. We are the awareness within which all of this arises. Like the sky that watches the weather pass through. The storms come and go. The clouds gather and disperse. But the sky remains unchanged. When you can rest in this awareness, even for a moment, the battle loses its power to define you. Yes, lust may still arise. Yes, the struggle may continue, but you're no longer identified with it. You're no longer convinced that this struggle is who you are. The spiritually awake struggle with lust not because they're failing, but because they're awake enough to feel the full force of being human. They're sensitive enough to feel every current, every drive, every hunger. And they're isolated enough to face these things often without support or understanding. But this struggle, as painful as it is, can become a teacher. It can show us where we're wounded and need healing. It can reveal our need for real human connection, not false substitutes. It can humble us, reminding us that we're not as far above the flesh as we might like to think. And it can deepen our compassion for every other human being struggling with their own desires and weaknesses. The battle with lust is not a sign that you're spiritually failing. It's often a sign that you're spiritually growing. Growing into a fuller awareness of what it means to be both spirit and flesh, both divine and animal, both awakened and still very much in the process of learning what that awakening means. So be gentle with yourself. Be honest about the struggle. Seek help when you need it. Attend to your wounds. Practice presence with your desires without being controlled by them. And remember, always remember, that you are not alone in this battle. Every mystic, every saint, every truly awakened person has walked this same difficult path. The flesh is weak, yes, but the spirit...
There comes a point in nearly every life when faith in any form begins to crumble. It doesn't matter whether you call it faith in God, faith in people, faith in progress, or even faith in yourself. There comes a moment when all of it feels absurd, when the world appears to spin without reason, and you stand at the center wondering what on earth any of this is for. And you see, that is a very revealing place to arrive at, because the loss of faith is not the end of the spiritual journey. It is the beginning of it. We grow up believing that faith is something we must cling to, something we must protect from doubt like a fragile flame in a storm. But real faith does not need protection. Real faith is what remains when all beliefs have collapsed. For what you call belief is often only certainty dressed in spiritual clothing, and certainty is brittle, like glass. The moment life becomes unpredictable, it shatters. So what happens when your life stops making sense? When the things you trusted, religion, success, relationships, your very sense of purpose, seem hollow or even cruel. Most people panic. They rush to replace one belief with another. They switch religions, chase new philosophies, or drown themselves in distractions. But the wise do something very strange. They stop running. They stand still in the darkness and let the questions echo, because they know that doubt is not the enemy of faith. It is its purifier. You see, to lose faith is to lose the false ground on which you once stood. And that can feel like dying, because in a sense, it is. The self that you believed was secure, the one that thought it understood what life was, begins to dissolve. But what dies is not you. It is only the illusion that you ever knew what you were doing here. Faith, when it is real, is not a belief that things will be fine. It is the recognition that things already are fine, even when they appear chaotic. The universe is not obliged to make sense to the human mind. And the moment you stop demanding that it should, you begin to see that it is not senseless at all, it is simply vast. When we lose faith, what we are really losing is the idea that life should serve our understanding. We forget that the mind is not the master of life, but its expression. The mind is like a mirror, reflecting what appears before it. But we try to make it a sculptor, carving out meaning, demanding control, demanding permanence. And when reality refuses to conform, we call it meaningless. Yet the absurdity we feel is not in life itself, it is in our insistence that it must fit our definitions. Look carefully and you will see that every crisis of faith is an invitation to look without a map. And that is terrifying, because the map gives us the illusion of direction. We like to think we are on our way somewhere toward enlightenment, success, redemption. But what if the road itself is the destination? What if there is nowhere to arrive, nothing to prove, no cosmic verdict waiting at the end of time? The loss of faith strips away your idols one by one. It shows you that the gods you worshipped, your ideals, your philosophies, your achievements, were always carved from the same stone of thought. And when the stone cracks, you begin to see the emptiness beneath. That emptiness is not a void to fear. It is the space from which life itself emerges. When you lose faith, the ground beneath you disappears because it was never there to begin with. You realize that you have been walking on air the entire time. You begin to laugh, not because the situation is funny, but because you see how absurdly serious you've been about something that was never under your control. Life has never depended on your faith in it. It moves, breathes, and unfolds entirely on its own. The stars are not burning because you believe in them. The waves do not crash upon the shore because you understand the ocean. Life simply is, and your faith or lack of it has nothing to do with its being. This realization is both humbling and liberating. It humbles you because it shows that you were never the center of the story, but it liberates you because it means the story does not depend on you to continue. Losing faith is not a curse. It is a sacred disillusionment. The illusion that dies is the one that whispered, "You must know what this means." And when that illusion dies, what remains is raw experience, the taste of existence without interpretation, the rain falling without reason, the silence that follows your last question, the simple awareness that you are here, breathing, feeling, being. And then something extraordinary happens. In the very moment you stop trying to believe, you begin to see, not with the eyes of the intellect, but with the eyes of presence. You see that faith was never meant to be a belief. It was meant to be a way of seeing. So when you find yourself saying, "I've lost faith in life," pause for a moment. Notice that life has not lost faith in you. The sun still rises, the earth still turns, your heart still beats. Something larger than your understanding is carrying you even through this despair. And that, my friends, is the quiet beginning of real faith. Because faith, when it is pure, is not a conclusion, it is participation. It is the willingness to live without answers and to still marvel at the mystery. It is the courage to trust that what is unfolding is not happening to you, but through you. And when you reach that understanding, when you finally see that losing faith is the invitation to experience life without filters, you begin to see that what you called loss was only the breaking of a shell. Inside that shell, life itself has always been waiting, free, eternal, and complete. When you have truly lost faith, you are standing in a kind of spiritual silence. It is not comfortable at first. The mind screams for meaning. It wants the old symbols back, the gods, the promises, the goals. It wants the ground it used to walk upon. But silence, if you allow it, begins to reveal something extraordinary. You begin to sense that the meaning you were chasing was never out there waiting to be found. It was always in the act of looking itself. The very energy that drove you to seek purpose was the same pulse that creates suns and galaxies. You were never separated from meaning. You were meaning happening in human form. This is why despair can be such a sacred teacher. It is the gate through which the false self cannot pass. Every philosophy, every religion, every grand certainty eventually collapses under the weight of reality. Because life is too vast to fit inside a system of thought. And when your system collapses, you are not left with nothing, you are left with everything. You may have noticed that the people who seem most at peace are not those who have all the answers, but those who have stopped needing them. They laugh easily, they move freely, they are not anxious about being right. It's not that they've discovered some grand secret, it's that they have made peace with not knowing. They have learned to rest in the mystery instead of trying to solve it. You see, losing faith is not about losing your connection to life. It's about losing your illusion of separation. It's about realizing that life was never something happening to you, it was always happening as you. And when that realization dawns, it doesn't come as a thought. It comes as a feeling, a subtle warmth, a quiet recognition that you have always been home. Imagine a wave in the ocean, convinced that it is lost because it no longer feels the security of being near the shore. It forgets that it was never separate from the ocean in the first place. The wave cannot be lost because it is the ocean moving in form. You are that wave. The loss you feel is the ocean reminding you of what you are made of. When we lose faith, what actually happens is that the ego loses its foothold. The part of you that wanted life to serve its plans finally surrenders. You begin to see that life doesn't need your permission to unfold. And in that surrender, a space opens, a stillness that allows reality to be just as it is. That stillness is not apathy, it is awareness. Faith returns then, not as belief, but as trust. Not the trust that everything will go your way, but the trust that even when it doesn't, you are still a part of something immeasurably whole. It is like falling backward into the arms of the universe and discovering they were never not there. What you begin to realize is that life is not a riddle to be solved, but a song to be heard. You don't stand outside it, trying to decode the melody. You are one of the notes. The loss of faith becomes a deep listening, a return to the rhythm you had forgotten while trying so hard to understand the music. Look at a child playing in the sand. There is no agenda there, no doctrine, no search for purpose, and yet the play itself is full of purpose. Life in its purest form is self-fulfilling. The ocean waves not to reach the shore, but because waving is its nature. The stars do not shine to illuminate something else. They shine because shining is what they are. And when you understand this, you realize that you, too, are an expression of life being what it is. You begin to see that even your doubts, your losses, your long nights of the soul are part of that same dance. The darkness is not against the light, it defines it. Without doubt, faith would have no depth. Without loss, love would have no tenderness. Without death, life would have no urgency. Everything that frightened you was secretly working in your favor, shaping you into someone who could finally see without filters. And so, the true purpose of faith is not to escape suffering, but to see through it, to look pain in the eyes and realize that even it belongs. When the rain falls, it doesn't ask whether it is doing the right thing. It simply falls. When the wind blows, it doesn't question its direction. It moves, because that is what wind does. And when you lose faith, you too are simply passing through a natural season of the soul. Every human being will face this moment in some form. The mystics called it the dark night. The philosophers called it existential despair. But in truth, it is the same event the moment life strips you bare of all false meanings so that you may encounter the real one. And what is the real one? It cannot be said. Because the moment you say it, you turn it into a concept. But you can feel it like a quiet hum beneath everything that happens. It is the stillness between your thoughts, the pause before laughter, the silence that holds every sound. That silence, that hum, that awareness, that is faith itself. When you realize this, you stop searching for faith as something to hold on to. You begin to see that it was never lost. It only hid behind your attempts to define it. The divine, if you wish to call it that, is not something you find at the end of a road. It is what has been looking through your eyes all along. So when you say, "I've lost faith in life," look again. You haven't lost faith. You've simply lost your ideas about what life should be. And in that loss lies the opportunity to discover what life is. It is not a story with a happy ending. It is not a test to be passed. It is not a puzzle to be solved. It is an ever unfolding mystery that invites you to participate. You are not meant to believe in it. You are meant to be it. The loss of faith is the final invitation to stop pretending, to stop performing, and to start living. It is the beginning of intimacy with reality. And that intimacy, once it awakens, is the quietest, most unshakable form of faith there is. For the one who has truly lost faith in life does not need to find it again. He realizes that life never asked for his faith in the first place. Life only asked him to see. There comes a moment in every person's life when the dream begins to shimmer, when the familiar world starts to look just slightly unreal. You may be sitting in traffic, or washing the dishes, or standing in line at the market, and suddenly, without warning, something inside you stirs. The voices around you feel distant, the motions mechanical, and for a brief second, you sense that you are watching a play you no longer believe in. That is the beginning of awakening. Now, it's a very strange thing, because most people don't want to wake up. They say they do, of course. They read about enlightenment, they listen to lectures, they meditate with furrowed brows. But what they really want is to dream a more pleasant dream, not to wake up entirely. For awakening, you see, has a way of shaking the ground beneath everything you thought was solid. It turns your world upside down and whispers, none of this is quite what you believed. The moment you begin to wake up, the game changes. You start to notice how much of life is made of roles, how everyone, including yourself, has been acting a part. The businessman acts successful, the monk acts humble, the teacher acts wise, the student acts eager. And you begin to laugh, not in mockery but in wonder, realizing that you too were an actor, performing your identity as though it were real. And then comes the disorienting thought, if I am not this character, then who am I? That is the first irritation you cause to others when you begin to awaken. You start to question the script, and nothing annoys a cast more than an actor who forgets their lines. Society is built on collective agreement, you see. We all pretend that money is valuable, that titles mean something, that certain clothes indicate worth, that success equals happiness. These agreements keep the game consistent. When you stop believing them, you disturb the rhythm. You may find that people around you begin to react defensively. They sense something unsettling about you, not because you preach, but because you no longer respond the way they expect. You no longer feed the drama, no longer trade in gossip, no longer chase the same symbols. You have, in a sense, stepped off the stage and begun to watch the play. And that simple act threatens the illusion of those still performing. Now, it's not your fault. It's simply that awakening has consequences. The spiritually awake person irritates the ego in others because your very presence reveals that there is another way to be. You become a kind of mirror that refuses to flatter. People look at you and unconsciously feel the quiet question, what if I've been asleep all along? And for the ego, that is the most terrifying question of all. The ego, you see, thrives on certainty. It wants to know who it is, what it controls, what others think of it. It builds fences of identity and calls them safety. But awakening is like a breeze that slips through the cracks. It whispers, you are not this, you are not that, you are not even what you think. And when that whisper comes, the ego trembles. It tightens its grip, it resists, and it lashes out. This is why, throughout history, those who have awakened have often been ridiculed, misunderstood, or even feared. Socrates irritated Athens. Buddha confused kings. Jesus angered the priests, not because they sought to overthrow the world, but because they saw through it. They pointed out that the emperor had no clothes, and the emperor never likes that kind of news. When you begin to see through the illusion, you realize that much of what people call reality is simply convention rules agreed upon for the sake of order, not truth. That is why the awakened being appears so calm. They are not rebelling against the game. They've simply stopped mistaking it for ultimate reality. They can play it with lightness, humor, and grace, because they know it's a play. The danger, however, is to mistake awakening for superiority. Many fall into that trap. They believe, I am awake and others are not, and thus a new ego is born, the ego of the enlightened one. But awakening is not about being better. It is about seeing that there is no better and no worse, that every being, sleeping or awake, is the same life expressing itself in different forms. You see, if you understand that, compassion naturally arises. You no longer resent those who misunderstand you. You pity them gently, as you would someone lost in a dream. And you remember that you too were once asleep. There's no judgment in that, only understanding. And here is the most beautiful paradox. The more awake you become, the more ordinary you seem. You laugh more. You stop trying to fix everyone. You realize there's nothing to preach, nothing to convert, nothing to save. Because what could possibly need saving in a universe that is already perfect in its imperfection? It's like a person who's been searching everywhere for their glasses only to find them perched on their nose. They laugh, not because they've achieved something great, but because they finally see how absurd the whole search was. So, when you begin to wake up, life becomes at once lighter and deeper. You cry more easily, but you also laugh more freely. You see tragedy and comedy as two sides of the same cosmic coin. You stop clinging to permanence because you understand that change is the very nature of being. And as this realization sinks in, the irritation you cause others begins to lessen, not because they've awakened, but because you've stopped needing them to. You walk among the sleeping with kindness, knowing that each of them will stir in their own time, in their own way. You see, awakening is not something you achieve. It's what happens when you stop trying to achieve. It's the natural unfolding of awareness once the mind grows quiet enough to notice that it's always been awake. The illusion was never that you were asleep, only that you thought you were separate. And when that illusion fades, you see it everywhere. In the laughter of a child, in the rustle of leaves, in the sound of traffic, in the stillness of the night. Life itself becomes your teacher, your lover, your companion. There is no outside anymore, no other, no thing to attain. There is only this endless moment, shimmering with the quiet presence of what you truly are. You see, once a person begins to wake up, there's a very curious thing that happens. The world doesn't change, not outwardly, but your relationship to it shifts completely. What once seemed heavy begins to feel light. What once demanded control now asks only for understanding. And the extraordinary thing is that life, which used to appear as a struggle, begins to unfold as a kind of play. Now, I don't mean a frivolous play, not a game of escapism, but a play in the deepest sense, the Sanskrit word lila, meaning the divine play of existence itself. The entire universe, in all its complexity and tragedy and beauty, is this cosmic dance of energy, constantly expressing and dissolving itself. And here's the marvelous part. You are it. You are the dance, the dancer, and the witnessing of it all. The trouble begins only when you forget that, when you take the game too seriously. You begin to believe that the masks are your face, that your job is your worth, that your name defines your being. And so you build a little fortress around this idea called me, and you spend your life defending it. But the walls are made of paper, and the wind of reality is strong. When you awaken, those walls start to tremble. At first, it feels like a loss, the loss of identity, the loss of meaning, the loss of certainty. But as the dust settles, you realize that nothing real was lost at all. Only the illusions have fallen away. What remains is not a smaller self, but a boundless presence. This is why the awakened person often appears so still. They are not indifferent. They are simply no longer confined to a single perspective. They can move between joy and sorrow without resistance, because they understand that both are waves on the same ocean. When you are no longer trying to control the tide, you can float. And this floating, this effortless way of being, is what the Chinese call wu wei, non-forcing. It doesn't mean doing nothing. It means allowing everything to happen through you rather than by you. It is living as the wind blows, as the water flows, as the fire burns, naturally, spontaneously, and with complete trust in the unfolding of things. Most people live as if they are separate from life, as if the universe is something they must manipulate into shape. But you see, that's the grand illusion. You are not living in the universe. You are the universe living itself as you. Every breath you take is the cosmos inhaling and exhaling through this particular form. Every thought, every heartbeat, every tear is the dance continuing in yet another rhythm. Once you see this, you stop asking, what should I do with my life? Because the question itself dissolves. Life is already doing itself through you. The tree doesn't ask how to grow. The river doesn't ask which way to flow. They simply express the nature of what they are. You, too, are that expression. And then comes the greatest freedom of all, the freedom from needing to be free. You no longer chase enlightenment because you realize that the seeker was the sought. The destination was never somewhere else. It was the ground beneath your feet the entire time. Now, this understanding doesn't mean that pain disappears. Life still contains its sorrows, its heartbreaks, its moments of loss. But suffering, you see, is what happens when we resist pain. Pain is natural, suffering is optional. When you accept that even sorrow has its place in the dance, you begin to see beauty in everything, even in endings. When someone awakens, their laughter changes. It's not the laughter of mockery or victory, but of recognition. The laughter of someone who suddenly sees the simplicity behind the elaborate disguise. You realize that all this striving, all this seriousness, all this effort to be something was like clouds passing across an endless sky. The sky was never troubled. That's why so many enlightened beings seem to laugh so much. They've seen through the cosmic joke that we spend lifetimes trying to become what we already are. The entire struggle was a kind of divine hide and seek, and the punchline is that there was never anywhere to hide. When you look at the world through awakened eyes, even the chaos makes sense. You see that the apparent disorder of life is the very thing that gives it harmony. It's like a piece of jazz music if you listen closely. The dissonance is what gives it depth. The pauses make the melody sing. Without contrast, there can be no art, no meaning, no experience. So, when you find yourself irritated by the ego in others, remember this: it is the same life pretending to be lost, the same consciousness playing the role of ignorance. And if you can see that, even for a moment, compassion arises without effort. You stop trying to wake people up by shaking them, and instead you wake them by loving them. Because love, real love, is the ultimate expression of awakening. It's not the sentimental affection of possession or desire. It is the recognition that there is no other. To love is to see yourself in everything and everything in yourself. That's why the mystics say God is love, not because there's a deity handing out affection, but because the very structure of existence is unity, and unity experienced from within feels like love. And then, quite naturally, you begin to live differently. You move through the world with a light touch. You act, but without anxiety about results. You speak, but without the need to convince. You work, but without the hunger for reward. And because you no longer demand life to be anything other than what it is, you discover that it unfolds with astonishing grace. At some point, you will look back on your journey and realize something extraordinary. Every mistake, every heartbreak, every confusion was the path itself. The obstacles were not in your way. They were your way. The very things that irritated your ego were the exact pressures that softened you into awareness. Life has always known what it was doing, even when you didn't. So, if you are awakening and the world seems strange, if friends misunderstand you, if people react to your calm with suspicion, if life feels at once empty and full, don't worry. You're not losing your mind. You're finding your soul. The emptiness is not absence, it's spaciousness. The silence is not loneliness, it's truth speaking softly. You are the awareness behind the play, the stillness behind the storm, the watcher of all that comes and goes. And when you see that clearly, you no longer seek a place to belong, because you realize you belong everywhere. You no longer seek approval, because you know you were never apart from what approves. The wave has remembered it is the ocean. And so you laugh again, not because you've reached the end, but because there was never a beginning. Only this endless now, rippling through eternity as you. Have you ever noticed that the more you try to figure life out, the less you seem to understand it? You sit there, head full of thoughts, tracing circles in your mind, trying to make sense of everything, what to do, what to say, where to go, how to become who you think you should be. You believe that if you could only think a little harder, if you could only solve the puzzle, peace would finally arrive. But the harder you think, the farther peace seems to drift. Because the mind, for all its brilliance, is a terrible place to live when it won't stop moving. Overthinking is one of the quietest prisons in the modern world. You can't see the bars, yet they surround you. You can't hear the locks, yet they click into place every time you question yourself again. What if I'm wrong? What if I fail? What if I make the wrong choice? The mind loops and loops, convinced that control will bring safety, unaware that control is the very thing causing its suffering. You become trapped in the illusion that understanding more will make life easier, when in truth, life only feels heavy because you keep trying to carry it with thought alone. There's a strange irony here. The same mind that creates the problem is the one you rely on to fix it. You keep asking the overactive mind to think its way out of its own confusion, like asking a storm to calm itself by blowing harder. It's an endless cycle analysis. Doubt, reassurance, then more analysis again. And though you tell yourself you're being careful or responsible, what you're really being is afraid. Fear hides behind thought. Every overthinker is at heart someone trying to feel safe. You don't want to make a mistake, don't want to be hurt, don't want to lose control, but the more you try to avoid pain by planning around it, the more you live in the shadow of it. Life becomes one long rehearsal for a moment that never comes. You're preparing to live instead of living. And so, your mind keeps spinning, always revisiting the past, always predicting the future, rarely allowing you to be here, in the only place life actually happens. You might sit at a cafe, coffee in hand, sunlight spilling through the window, yet your body is the only part of you that's present. Your thoughts are somewhere else entirely, chasing what-ifs and should-haves. You've forgotten what it means to simply exist. The problem isn't that you think. Thinking is beautiful when it's used as a tool. The problem is that you don't know how to put the tool down. The modern mind has become addicted to solving. It treats every sensation, every emotion, every uncertainty as something to fix. But not everything broken needs mending. Some things are only asking to be felt. Imagine standing by a river. The current is strong, and you drop a small leaf into it. You watch as the water carries it effortlessly downstream. That's how life moves when you stop resisting it. But if you try to catch the leaf, to control where it goes, the moment you grab at it, you disturb the water. The surface ripples, and what was once simple becomes messy. Overthinking does the same. It disturbs the current of being. You've likely noticed that the best insights, the most peaceful moments, come not when you're trying to think your way toward them, but when you've finally given up. It's when you stop struggling, when you let go of the mental tug-of-war, that clarity suddenly appears, like sunlight breaking through clouds that were never solid to begin with. But most people don't trust that process. They believe that letting go means becoming passive, lazy, or careless. In truth, it's the opposite. Letting go is the highest form of intelligence. It's the moment you stop trying to make life obey you and instead begin to listen to it. Because life, like music, was never meant to be figured out. It was meant to be played. Think of how you listen to your favorite song. You don't analyze every note or measure. You let it wash through you. You feel it, and that's why you enjoy it. But when you turn life into a problem to solve, you lose the melody. You start dissecting beauty instead of dancing with it. Overthinking blocks the life you want because it builds a wall between experience and awareness. You can't taste a meal while describing it in your head. You can't love deeply while questioning whether you're doing it right. You can't live fully while narrating your every move. The commentary becomes louder than the life itself. The truth is, your mind will never think its way into peace because thought is born from division, from the sense of me and the world, this and that, should and shouldn't. Real peace can only appear when that division ends, when you stop seeing life as something to manage and start seeing it as something to meet. When you are caught in overthinking, you live in delay. Every moment is postponed until the next decision is made, the next question answered. But life doesn't wait for conclusions. It unfolds now. It moves with or without your permission. You can spend your entire life preparing for it and never actually meet it. Some people spend years waiting to start, waiting until they feel ready, confident, healed, certain. But readiness never arrives in the way they imagine. Certainty is not the gate to life. It is the grave of possibility. The more you demand to know before acting, the smaller your world becomes. To live freely, you must be willing to not know. You must dare to walk without a map. Because the truth is, the mind can only plan based on what it already knows, and what it already knows is too small for what life wants to give you. The overthinker never leaves the circle of familiarity. They keep spinning inside the known, terrified of stepping into the unknown, unaware that the unknown is where life actually begins. What if the life you want is already here, hidden beneath the noise of your thoughts? What if the freedom you seek is not somewhere in the future, but waiting quietly beneath all the analyzing, the worrying, the self-questioning? What if the only thing separating you from peace is the belief that you must earn it through understanding? At some point, every overthinker reaches a breaking point, that sacred exhaustion, where the mind finally admits defeat. You can't think anymore, you can't plan anymore, you've tried every angle, every solution, and still, life doesn't obey your designs. And in that surrender, something miraculous happens. You stop fighting, you stop thinking your way out, and for the first time, you simply breathe. In that breath, the fog begins to lift. You realize that the peace you were chasing wasn't hidden in answers. It was hidden in stillness. The answers were never the destination. They were the distraction. What you were searching for was not knowledge, but silence, the kind that doesn't come from solving, but from seeing. To overthink is to live half a life, to exist in potential but never in presence. You wait for a perfect understanding that will never come. Meanwhile, life waits for you to return to it. When you finally do, when you let the noise fall away, you discover that you were never truly lost. You were simply too loud inside to hear the quiet truth beneath it all. That life does not need your permission to unfold. It only needs your attention. And when that attention returns to the present moment, even for a breath, everything shifts. The problems shrink. The noise softens. You realize the river was never against you, it was carrying you all along. There comes a moment, somewhere after the storm of thought has exhausted itself, when silence doesn't feel like emptiness anymore. It feels like home. You sit quietly and realize that all along, the noise wasn't protecting you, it was hiding you from yourself. You thought thinking would make you stronger, safer, wiser. But now, in the stillness that follows all that effort, you see that wisdom was never waiting inside your thoughts. It was waiting beneath them. The mind believes that if it keeps running, it can outrun fear. But fear is not behind you, it is the very motion of running itself. You can't escape fear by thinking faster, planning harder, or knowing more. The more you run from uncertainty, the more it defines you. True peace begins when you stop trying to outrun life and instead allow it to catch up with you. Overthinking is a symptom of mistrust. You don't trust life to unfold without your supervision, so you hover over it like a nervous parent, constantly correcting, anticipating, preparing. But the beauty of existence is that it doesn't need to be managed. The flowers bloom without being told how. The stars move without instruction. The heart beats without your permission. You are part of that same intelligence, yet you spend your days doubting it. You might say, if I stop thinking, I'll make mistakes. But mistakes are part of the dance. They are not interruptions, they are steps. Every so-called mistake you've ever made was life moving you towards something you couldn't yet see. If you look closely, you'll notice that some of your most painful wrong turns became the very paths that revealed your strength. Overthinking tries to prevent mistakes, but in doing so, it prevents growth. To live without overthinking is not to live without thought. It's to let thought play its proper role as a servant, not a master. When a thought is needed, it arises. When it's done, it dissolves. The problem is not in thinking, but in identifying with the thinker. When you believe you are your thoughts, you drown in them. But when you see that you are the awareness noticing them, suddenly they lose their power. They pass through you like clouds across a vast sky. To rest in that awareness is to see thoughts for what they are, temporary movements in something much larger, much quieter, much freer than the mind. Once you begin to live from that space, life stops feeling like a problem to be solved and starts feeling like an experience to be lived. You no longer wake up with the need to control every outcome. You start to notice the subtle rhythm that runs beneath everything, the way events unfold, the way timing seems to align when you stop forcing it. It's as if life had been waiting for you to stop interfering. This is where real intelligence begins. Not the kind measured by speed or logic, but by depth, by the ability to listen. The universe is always speaking, but most people can't hear it over the noise of their own analysis. When you quiet down, the guidance you were searching for begins to emerge naturally. Not as a voice from above, but as intuition, a quiet knowing that moves through you like wind through leaves. You don't have to think your way into it. You simply allow it. You trust that life, like breath, knows what it's doing. You inhale, you exhale, and everything takes care of itself. Overthinking says, I must make life happen. Awareness whispers, life is already happening. And the difference between those two is the difference between struggle and flow. There's a certain magic in surrendering to that flow. You start noticing how everything connects, how every person you meet, every obstacle you face, every moment of doubt or delay fits into a larger tapestry that the mind could never have designed. Overthinking reduces life to fragments. Awareness restores it to wholeness. You begin to see that nothing was ever missing. The job you didn't get, the person who left, the opportunity that slipped away, they weren't mistakes. They were movements in a pattern too vast to grasp from where you stand. Overthinking tries to flatten that mystery into a straight line. But life is a circle. Everything returns in its own form, in its own time. When you understand this, you begin to relax. You begin to breathe differently. You stop asking life for guarantees and start meeting it as it is. That's when the overthinking mind finally dissolves, not because you've conquered it, but because you've outgrown it. You've learned that control is a poor substitute for trust. And here's the great paradox. When you stop trying to control everything, things actually begin to align. Not because the world suddenly bends to your will, but because your will no longer resists the world. You move with life instead of against it. You act not from fear, but from clarity. This is what people mean when they talk about flow, that effortless harmony between doing and being. It's the artist painting without self-consciousness, the athlete lost in motion, the child playing without purpose. It's the moment when the watcher and the watched become one. And the beautiful part is that it's not rare. It's not reserved for special people. It's the natural state of being that overthinking has simply obscured. Once the noise quiets, you realize the stillness was there all along. The mind will still whisper from time to time. It will still ask, are you sure? What if this goes wrong? But now you see those questions for what they are, old echoes of a self that believed it needed control to feel safe. You can smile at them, thank them for their concern, and move on. The mind becomes a companion rather than a captor. Eventually, you come to see that life's wisdom was never hidden in complexity, but in simplicity. You don't need more certainty. You don't need more answers. You need less noise. Peace is not something you find after thinking through every possibility. It's what remains when the thinking stops and awareness begins. It's what arises when you no longer stand between yourself and life. So when your mind starts spinning again, when it replays old conversations or rehearses endless outcomes, pause. Don't fight it. Just notice it. Watch the current of thought without diving in. Feel the body breathing, the heart beating, the presence underneath it all. In that moment, something ancient wakes within you. You remember that you were never the storm, you were the sky. And the sky does not need to stop the storm to remain at peace. It only needs to remember its own vastness. This is the essence of living beyond overthinking, not that you control the mind, but that you no longer confuse yourself with it. You let thoughts come, you let them go, and in between, you live. You finally live. Because the life you've been trying so hard to figure out was never waiting for you to think your way into it. It was waiting for you to feel your way back into now. And when you really arrive, you realize that life had never gone anywhere. You were the one lost in thought. The river never stopped flowing. You just stopped trusting it. And now you can float again